The first time I saw her, she didn't knock or say hello. She just walked straight across my driveway like it was a public sidewalk. Blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, and a clipboard clutched like a scepter. Everything about her screamed authority she didn't actually have. I'd moved into the house on Pine Hollow Lane 2 days earlier. It sat at the far end of the cul-de-sac, surrounded by pine trees and space. Exactly what I wanted. After years of apartment noise and city stress, I was ready for quiet, solitude, chance to breathe. Instead, I got Karen. She paused briefly when she noticed me standing by the garage, her expression flickering between annoyance and fake cheer. "Oh, didn't mean to startle you," she said, already stepping off the far edge of the driveway. "I'm Karen, HOA president. This is the fastest way to the rec center, just so you know. We all use it." She didn't wait for a response. She just kept walking, through my property and out the other side like nothing had happened. I stood there stunned. My driveway was over 100 feet long, paved with red stone and clearly bordered with fencing. There were no sidewalks connected to it. No public path. Nothing to suggest it was anything but private. That night I checked the property lines. They were clear. The driveway, the bordering lawn, the narrow strip of pine-shaded path beyond it. All of it was legally mine. The next morning, I watched from my living room window as Karen marched across it again, this time chatting loudly on her phone. I stepped outside. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my tone even. "Would you mind not cutting through? This is private property." She glanced up unfazed. "It's just a shortcut. Been doing it for years. No harm in it. There's a sidewalk just around the corner, which takes 5 extra minutes. And like I said, we've all been doing this. You'll get used to it." She disappeared around the bend without so much as a wave. That afternoon, I installed a sign at the edge of the driveway. "Private property. No trespassing" in bold, black lettering. The next morning it was gone. I found it lying face down in the ditch, stakes snapped clean in half. This time when she walked by, she didn't say a word. Just gave me a knowing look like I was a naive kid playing in grown-up territory. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just about a shortcut. It was about control. Over the next few days, I tried different ways to handle it. I reached out to a couple of neighbors. One of them, an elderly man named Roy, shook his head. "You're not the first," he said. "Karen's been treating this neighborhood like her personal fiefdom for years. Most of us just let it go. Why? Because fighting her isn't worth the headache. She's got friends on the board. Is loud. She's persistent. You'll spend more time arguing than living." But I hadn't moved here to surrender my space to someone else's entitlement. Especially not someone who trampled boundaries with a smile and a clipboard. So I tried again. This time, I printed a second sign and bolted it to a wooden post reinforced in concrete. It wasn't going anywhere. The next morning I watched her approach. She stopped in front of the sign, arms crossed. Her lips twitched, barely masking a sneer. "You really going to make this a thing?" she asked. "It's already a thing," I replied. "I'm just responding appropriately." Her eyes narrowed. "You know, the HOA has rules about aesthetic uniformity. Unauthorized signage could result in a fine." "I checked," I said, holding up a copy of the bylaws. "Security signage on private property is explicitly permitted." She didn't respond. Just turned and walked off, but her posture had changed. No longer breezy and smug. There was tension now. A subtle, simmering irritation beneath the surface. I pushed back. And that made me a problem. The very next day I received my first HOA violation letter. Trash bins left visible past collection hours. A fine of $50. I checked the footage on my front camera. The bins were out for 2 hours after pickup. Not overnight. Not obstructing anything. 2 days later, another notice. Shrubs exceeding regulation height. My shrubs were neatly trimmed. Then came driveway material out of harmony with community standards. I saw what this was. Karen had declared war. Quietly, professionally, and with the full weight of the HOA behind her. And it all started with a shortcut. But here's the thing about me. I don't like being bullied. Especially not in my own home. I started documenting everything. Her walks, the violations, the letters. Every fine. Every glare. Every casual trespass. Because if Karen wanted a fight, I was going to give her one. And I played to win. If Karen's goal was to wear me down with pettiness, she underestimated how stubborn I could be. After the third bogus violation letter, this time for non-compliant mailbox paint, I knew she was testing how far she could push before I snapped. Spoiler, I didn't. I documented everything. Kept a log. Photos with timestamps. Video clips from my security cameras. I created a spreadsheet labeled Karen Incidents. Yes, in all caps, and color-coded each entry. Trespassings were red. Violation letters were yellow. HOA rule contradictions were green. And there were a lot of greens. I wasn't just gathering evidence. I was building a case. Still, it didn't stop her. Karen had developed a new habit. Walking slower. Each time she crossed my driveway now, she'd linger. Pause mid-step. Pretend to check her phone. As if daring me to say something. As if mocking the very idea of boundaries. One morning I found a small note tucked under my windshield wiper. In neat cursive handwriting it read, "You're not making any friends here. Might want to consider fitting in before things get worse." No signature. But I didn't need one. Later that day, a neighbor I hadn't met yet, a kind woman named Denise, caught me at the mailbox. "I saw Karen walking across your drive again," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "You know she tried that with the Petersons last year. They moved within 6 months. Because of her. Because of the fines. The complaints. The pressure." She hesitated. "I'm just saying, don't let her get too comfortable. She gets off on control." I smiled and thanked her, but the warning stayed with me. Karen wasn't just entitled. She was strategic. So I decided to make my own move. The next morning, while Karen was doing her usual rec center march, she found something new waiting for her. 2 steel posts, freshly installed on either side of the driveway, connected by a thin, retractable chain. Low enough for a car to pass over, but high enough to block foot traffic. They were discreet, within regulation, and completely legal. She stopped dead in her tracks, hands on her hips. "You've got to be kidding me," she snapped. "Not at all," I replied, stepping out of the garage. "This is my property. These posts are here to protect it. You're obstructing a community route. There's no such thing as a community route across private land." Her jaw clenched. "This is hostile behavior." "No, Karen. This is a boundary." She stormed off without another word. I'd expected backlash, but not how quickly it came. That evening I received a certified letter from the HOA. The subject line read, "Unauthorized modification to front property." Inside was a $500 fine. According to the letter, the posts violated a clause about alterations that impact community accessibility or aesthetics. I checked the bylaws again. No such clause existed. In fact, there was an entire section about physical barriers being permitted for property protection. The letter was a bluff. But it told me one thing. Karen wasn't backing down. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Then the graffiti appeared. Someone had scrawled the word jerk in chalk across my driveway. Cleaned it up. The next day, it was rule Nazi. This time in red sidewalk chalk. And bigger. There was no camera footage. Whoever did it had stayed out of frame. But it wasn't hard to guess who'd encouraged it. Still, I didn't react. I just cleaned it up again. Methodical. Collected. Because Karen wanted a reaction. And I wasn't giving her the satisfaction. But I was done playing defense. I filed my first formal complaint with the HOA board. Not through Karen, but directly with their management office. I submitted every photo, every violation letter, every time-stamped video of her trespassing. I requested a hearing. I didn't expect them to take immediate action, but I wanted a paper trail. Something bigger than clipboard politics. That same week, I made a quiet trip to the county clerk's office and requested official property boundary verification. I also asked a local surveyor to update my lot's layout. Why? Because when this blew up, and it would, I needed to be ironclad. The turning point came one Thursday morning. Karen showed up again. But this time she didn't try to walk across. She stood at the edge of the posts, arms folded, scowling. "You think this little war of yours is clever?" she said, voice low and sharp. "I think following the law is clever. You should try it sometime. You're creating division in this neighborhood. I'm protecting my property." She took a slow step forward, just toeing the edge of the barrier. "You know what happens to people who cause trouble here, right?" I tilted my head. "No. But I think I'm about to find out." She smirked, cool, confident, dangerous. "Good. Then don't act surprised when the consequences show up." And with that she walked away. The next day they did. Blue and red lights flashed outside my window. 2 police cruisers. A 911 call had been made. Karen stood at the end of my driveway, talking animatedly to an officer, gesturing at the steel posts like they were murder weapons. I opened the front door and took a deep breath. It was time to face the storm. The sirens had stopped, but the tension buzzed in the air like static. 2 police officers stood at the edge of my driveway. Karen was halfway through an impassioned monologue, arms slicing the air like she was conducting an orchestra of injustice. One officer nodded politely. The other scanned my property with narrowed eyes. I stepped onto the porch, arms relaxed, posture open. "Morning, officers. Something I can help you with?" Karen spun toward me, triumphant. "Yes. He's illegally blocking a community access path and has created an unsafe environment for pedestrians, especially seniors like myself." The officer on the left, a broad-shouldered man with a clipboard in hand, gave me a neutral look. "We received a report of obstruction and possible public endangerment," he said. "Mind if we ask a few questions?" "Not at all," I replied. "Would you like to see the property deed, the county survey, or the HOA bylaws first?" His eyebrow twitched slightly. Karen's face tightened. "This isn't about paperwork, it's about people. He's put up metal posts and a chain that someone could trip over." I gestured calmly. "The posts are fully within my property line. And they're designed to prevent trespassing, not injury. In fact, they're no more dangerous than a garden fence. Which, by the way, Karen has around her roses." That earned a faint smile from the second officer. I handed over the documents, copies I'd kept ready since the day the posts went up. Surveyor's signature, property boundaries marked in red, and HOA guidelines clearly highlighting the allowance for low, non-permanent barriers on private property. They took a few minutes to review it all in silence. Karen stood there, arms crossed, eyes burning. Finally, the lead officer handed back the documents. "From what we can see, there's no legal violation here. Your property, your right to secure it." He nodded. "Thank you. But," he added, turning toward Karen, "calling 911 for a non-emergency civil dispute is not a great use of resources." Karen's mouth opened, then closed again. "We're not issuing a citation today," he continued. "But this is going on record." The word record hit her like a slap. As the officers departed, Karen stood frozen for a moment before pivoting toward me with cold fury. "You think you've won," she hissed. I met her gaze. "I think I've followed the law. You might want to try doing the same." She turned and stalked away, her heels clicking angrily against the asphalt. But I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Later that afternoon, an email pinged into my inbox from the HOA board. Subject line: Request for appearance, Community Conduct Review. Beneath the bland official wording was a clear message. Karen had failed with the police, so now she was coming for me with the full weight of the HOA. The meeting was scheduled for Friday. That gave me 4 days. I spent them preparing. I compiled a full presentation. Photos, video footage, dated violation notices, and a copy of every communication. I even gathered witness statements from 2 sympathetic neighbors, including Denise, who'd seen Karen trespassing multiple times. But most important of all, I printed the county's official land survey in poster size and mounted it on foam board. If the HOA wanted a performance, I'd give them one. Friday arrived gray and drizzling. Fitting, really. The HOA board met in the community clubhouse, a too-cheerful building painted mint green with fake shutters. Inside, folding chairs were arranged in neat rows facing a long plastic table where 5 board members sat. Karen dead center, flanked by people who looked like they owed her favors. She smiled at me as I entered. "Oui, poisonous." The proceedings began with polite introductions. Then Karen launched into a well-rehearsed speech about neighborhood harmony, and how one resident's rigidity was disrupting the peace. I waited until she was done, then calmly stood and walked to the center of the room. "I moved here for peace and privacy," I said. "Instead, I've faced harassment, false accusations, and an illegal attempt to co-opt my driveway as a public road." I clicked the remote and brought up the first image. Karen mid-stride walking across my driveway. Then the second, my no trespassing sign discarded in the ditch. Then the third, a close-up of the chalked insults. Each photo hit like a gavel. The room shifted. Board members exchanged glances. I outlined the bylaw inconsistencies in the violation letters, pointed out the fabricated fine, displayed the official survey, cited the local property codes, presented witness statements. I ended with a simple line. "I'm not here to win a power struggle. I'm here to protect my home. That's all." Silence followed. Even Karen didn't speak right away. Then the board president, a silver-haired man who'd barely said a word until now, cleared his throat. "Thank you. We'll review the evidence and follow up shortly." That was it. As I packed up, Karen leaned in slightly and whispered, "You've made a mistake." Smiled. "Only one of us brought evidence. And it wasn't you." I left the room with my head high. The storm was shifting, and Karen could feel it. It didn't take long for the consequences of Karen's 9/11 stunt to ripple through the neighborhood. That evening, a city officer showed up at my door, not in uniform but in plain clothes. A polite knock, a badge flashed, and a level voice that didn't match the chaos from earlier. "Mr. Carter?" he asked. "That's me," I said, heart pounding. "I'm Detective Miles. I'd like to speak to you about an incident involving a 911 call made earlier today. May I come in?" I nodded and stepped aside, unsure if I should feel relieved or alarmed. We sat in the living room, the scent of fresh brewed coffee lingering in the air. I noticed he didn't bring a notepad, just a recorder and calm eyes. "I understand there was a dispute with a member of your HOA," he began. "According to the report, you allegedly blocked public access with a barrier on your property." I couldn't help but chuckle at the wording. "It's my driveway. She's been using it like a public street for months. Put up posts. That's all." Miles nodded, pausing before speaking. "We reviewed the footage from the responding officer's body cams. It seems clear that you were on your own property, calm, and not in violation of any local ordinances. You also didn't make threats or escalate the situation." I waited, sensing there was a but coming. "However," he continued, "we take misuse of emergency services very seriously. The person who called 911 claimed there was a public safety emergency. There wasn't. So now we're obligated to review whether this was a false report." Karen had triggered an official investigation. But it was aimed at her, not me. "I'll cooperate fully," I said. "Appreciated. And one more thing," Miles added as he stood to leave. "You might want to attend the next HOA board meeting. I hear it's going to be lively." He left me with that cryptic warning and a card in case I had questions. The night passed without sleep. Not because I was afraid. Karen's antics had finally backfired, but because something deeper had shifted. The war she waged on me wasn't just personal anymore. She had involved law enforcement, weaponized the HOA, and tried to humiliate me in front of neighbors. This wasn't just about control. It was about power. And she was losing it. At the next HOA meeting, the community center parking lot was full. I hadn't seen this much turnout since the time someone proposed putting a cell tower near the park. I walked in and saw Karen already seated at the head table, flipping through a manila folder with practiced disdain. But there was something new in her expression, tight lips, darting eyes. She wasn't as smug as usual. She saw me and gave a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. "Glad you could join us, Mr. Carter," she said into the mic. "We'll be addressing unauthorized modifications to common areas tonight." I almost laughed out loud. But before I could respond, something unexpected happened. A woman from the audience, Denise, who lived 2 doors down, raised her hand. "Actually, I'd like to speak before we get into that," she said. Karen blinked. "This isn't open floor yet." "I move to amend the agenda," Denise said, her voice louder now. "We need to discuss a pattern of abuse from this board, starting with the misuse of emergency services against a resident." The room shifted. Murmurs spread like a wave. Karen's face paled. "That's not an HOA matter." Another neighbor stood up. Then another. One by one, voices rose. Not in anger, but in unity. They'd had enough. Of her rules. Of her bullying. Of her acting like a queen ruling over her tiny suburban kingdom. Someone even brought printouts. Emails from Karen. Fines with no warning. Photos she'd taken of people's yards. Complaints that sounded more personal than policy-driven. For the first time, Karen had no control of the room. I stayed seated. I didn't need to speak. My silence said enough. This wasn't about revenge. It was about exposure. After an hour of tense back and forth, someone motioned to suspend Karen from her chairwoman duties pending further review. Passed, unanimously. She slammed her folder shut, jaw clenched. "You're all making a huge mistake," she hissed. No one responded. She stormed out, heels clicking like gunfire against the tile floor. When the door closed behind her, the room exhaled. The acting chair, a soft-spoken older man named George, turned to me and offered a slight nod. "We'll be reviewing all previous complaints," he said. "Including yours, Mr. Carter. Thank you for your patience." The meeting ended with something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. On my way out, Denise caught up to me in the parking lot. "She's been a thorn for years," she said, eyes glinting. "It just took someone brave enough to stand up first." "I didn't mean to be the poster boy," I said with a half-smile. He shrugged. "Too late now." We both laughed, and for the first time since I moved in, I felt like I actually belonged. 2 weeks after the HOA review meeting, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox, bearing the HOA's official seal. No warning. No preamble. I took a deep breath before opening it. Inside was a formal letter. After thorough review, the board has determined that no violations were committed by the homeowner at redacted. The fine previously issued has been rescinded. The HOA encourages respectful boundaries between neighbors moving forward. It was short, sterile, but to me it was a declaration. Good one. Karen had thrown everything she had at me. False reports, bogus fines, whispered threats. And she lost. But what happened next? That was something even I didn't expect. Within days, I started noticing small things. The HOA's community newsletter, the one Karen wrote every month, arrived late and unsigned. The usual Karen's Corner was mysteriously absent. In its place was a blank block with the word editor needed. At the next monthly meeting, Karen was absent. Her seat at the long plastic table remained empty. When I asked a board member quietly where she was, they only offered a tight-lipped, "Karen is taking time off." But it wasn't time off. It was exile. Word began to spread. Apparently, several other homeowners had quietly submitted complaints about Karen in the wake of her 911 stunt. One even contacted the city's Office of Neighborhood Affairs. The final straw. A formal warning from law enforcement, citing abuse of emergency services. Karen wasn't just unpopular now, she was radioactive. And just like that, the queen of the cul-de-sac had fallen. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. Instead, I did something else. I removed the posts from the driveway. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need them anymore. With Karen gone, peace returned like spring after a bitter winter. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now waved. Denise brought over cookies. A couple I'd never spoken to before invited me to a block party. Even the air felt lighter. One morning as I was watering the roses, yes, the ones Karen had once claimed clashed with the neighborhood palette, I saw a for sale sign going up in front of Karen's house. I watched in silence as a real estate agent drove the stake into the lawn. He noticed me watching and offered a professional smile. "Beautiful morning, huh?" he called out. "The best I've had in a while," I replied. And I meant it. Karen moved out quietly one Sunday morning, cramming her life into a rental van with the help of two exhausted-looking nephews. She didn't say goodbye to anyone, just drove off like a bitter storm finally spent. But the damage she caused, that would take longer to heal. In the aftermath, the HOA board underwent a transformation. By fall, 3 members had resigned, either pressured by the community or tired of the drama. In their place, fresh faces emerged. Level-headed people who actually listened. The monthly meetings became less about fines and more about community gardens, safer sidewalks, and restoring trust. Ironically, I found myself nominated to join the board. I declined. I'd had enough politics to last me a lifetime. Still, I stayed involved. Quietly. Watching. Guarding. Because the truth is, there's always another Karen waiting in the wings. Another neighbor convinced they own more than their fair share of power. Another bully dressed up in bylaws. And when they come, I'll be ready. Because this wasn't just a story about a driveway. It was about something bigger. It was about standing your ground when someone tries to take what's yours. Your land, your peace, your dignity. And in the end, it wasn't noise or anger or shouting that won the day. It was calm. It was truth. It was a refusal to be intimidated. And most of all, it was proof that when the storm passes, good neighbors do look out for each other, even if it takes a little fire to remind them.